It's that time in the weekend when you wind down, relax, and build a computer. Just me? Awkward. Okay. I came across another APU, this time the 2400G, which should be Zen Plus based on the naming scheme, but it's actually first generation Zen with Vega graphics. I decided I had enough of A320 motherboards for the minute and went with this Gigabyte B450 that will ensure that this PC can be upgraded for a couple of years at least, all while staying on a budget. Storage taken care of by a 240GB M.2 SSD and a 500GB hard drive, nothing too fancy, but it will definitely do the job without slowdowns. The RAM is a 16GB kit of 3200 MT/s crucial ballistics that will probably carry over into future CPU upgrades since it's plentiful and only takes up 2 of the 4 slots on the motherboard, so more can be added if needed. My initial plan was to watercool this PC as I had this Corsair H45 AIO laying around for ages, but after testing it in this configuration I arrived at the conclusion that either my unit is defective or the H45 simply isn't very good. This isn't simply a case of draining and refilling the loop, the pump and fan are both loud, and since the fan seems new, I am forced to conclude this is probably the intended noise level. Very disappointing. I will definitely be keeping my eye out for a brand new deal on this for comparison purposes in the future. In the end, I ended up swapping it for a Wraith Prism RGB, which given how this case has a window I think is an adequate choice, while still being overkill for the CPU. For the PSU, I employed the brand new Colink unit that is 80 plus certified and looks to have cut all the right corners. No sleeving present to cut costs, nor is an on-off button for that matter, which is a bit strange, but the fan is quiet and the 12V rails delivers 480 watts, so no complaints here. I was initially skeptical if this is indeed a budget and not a garbage PSU, but after living with it for a couple of days and doing some digging on the brand on various forums, I was pleasantly surprised by my findings. Having two 6+2 pin PCI-e connectors helped to seal the deal for me, making so that I will not be avoiding this brand in the future for more budget-oriented builds. In the meantime, I have already ordered a 700W PSU from the same company that has 4 6+2 pin connectors, and I will test that in the near future as well, and we'll see if it still does well in a more demanding environment in a higher end build. This actually doesn't happen very often, but Colink has been moved in my mind from the level of the CITs of the world and onto the GameX sort of threshold, if that makes any sense. It's not going to be competing with EVGA or Superflow anytime soon, but if the price is right, I might choose it over, say, something like a Cooler Master. Now all that is left to do is to swap over the cooler and admire my job of hiding the ketchup and mustard cables with some black electrical tape. Funny how such a small detail can change the whole aesthetic of a build. In Heaven, the 2400G actually beat out the 3400G, and this is going to become kind of a theme for this video. There's really not a lot to it, it's just the fact that the faster RAM is really helping here. And even when all things are equal, the 3400G's iGPU is at best about 9 to 10% faster than this one. Just a side note here, the 1% and 0.1% figures are a bit flaky in this video because my afterburner macro thingy didn't quite work out as well as I hoped, so they might not always be updating correctly. The numbers when displayed are not wrong though. I will improve this in the future. Superposition, which is much newer benchmark than Heaven, it did really good with no frame time spikes, edging out the 3400G by about 50 points, which in practice means that they're functionally identical. In Rocket League, I did not feel compelled at all to turn down the resolution from Full HD, first testing with all the settings maxed out, which netted about 40 FPS in average, and then removing some of the eye candy in order to get more competitive settings and push the frame rate over 65-70 FPS constantly. Really, no matter how you choose to play, you're going to have a good experience here. I think that Fortnite is best played on the system with a medium preset and epic view distance, but your mileage may vary depending on what you prefer. I suspect most will turn down all the effects to low while leaving the view distance on epic, but regardless of how you like to play, the likelihood is that you will have a good experience. In Warzone, I let the game choose its settings because I haven't really mucked about with it too much, so I'm not sure of the relative performance impact of each setting, but I did notice that the dynamic resolution was set to on. Here I got around 45 FPS on average, making for an okay playing experience, with the only downside being a couple of frame time spikes. I think this might be down to the overlay used, as the game tended to crash a lot when Afterburner was active, like every time I tried to minimize it and sometimes when changing settings. Overall, I don't see this iGPU being an impediment to the gameplay experience until you save up and get yourself a dedicated GPU. Ryzen 0 Dawn at 720p low ran very well with 44 FPS. This is miles better than the 3400G that was a slideshow at the same resolution and settings. I am convinced that the RAM speed helped a lot, but thinking back on it, it might be also a combination of driver optimization and game patches, as a couple of drops since I tested with the newer APU. I observed no weird glitches or artifacts that sometimes plague systems with less than 4GB of VRAM, so I'm confident in calling this run playable and enjoyable to boot. Stranding, which is a game based on the same engine as Horizon Zero Dawn, did even better at 720p low, looking less washed out, but posting slightly lower frame rates. Regardless, fidelity effects remained off, as I don't like the fuzziness it introduces, but if you don't mind that sort of thing, 45 to 50 FPS is doable. It really doesn't cease to amaze me just how good the game looks regardless of the hardware it's running on. I just wish that the baby would stop ruining the fun with its incessant crying. Boy, that's not something I say very often. Now on to the last game for this video, which is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that returned 39 FPS at 720p low. 6 more than the 3400G, but with identical 1% and 0.1% lows. I think there might even be some scope to turn up some of the settings here without diminishing the FPS too much. And also there were a few stutters here and there in the benchmark, but during gameplay I found that the iGPU was more than up to the task. And finally Cinebench R20, and here we can spot the difference between the Zen and Zen Plus APUs in the form of a much less aggressive boost algorithm for the 2400G versus the 3400G. This is also where it becomes tricky. Should you go budget all the way with cheaper RAM and an A320 chipset but using the newer processor? Well, it actually depends. If you are the kind of person that will use your PC mainly for work stuff and occasionally gaming, but you are not too fast, I would go with the 3400G in its stock form, But if you are going to be using your system for gaming mostly, then saving a few pounds on the APU and investing them in the chipset RAM and PS3 instead in the name of future upgradability suddenly becomes compelling. And that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.